which is why we not only need to end taxation, and we can talk about alternatives to taxation. We not only need to end the ability of politicians to run up endless debts, but we also need to end the Federal Reserve. They should not control money. Government should not be deciding what money is or what it's worth. That's what's gotten us in an even bigger mess than the taxes.
This week's podcast is brought to you by Spartan Invest. Spartan currently manages hundreds of turnkey properties across Alabama and Tennessee, and is where I personally bought my first out-of-state turnkey property. In fact, I have 2 properties with them now, and both tenants just renewed for another 2 years. That should tell you the quality of their team and their due diligence. If you are a first-time investor or are looking to expand your real estate portfolio, check out SpartanInvest.com.
Are you tired of the 9-to-5 lifestyle? Do you want more freedom to do what you want, when you want it, without sacrificing your current income? Then this is the show for you. Every week, we dive into John's journey towards financial freedom and everything he has learned since 2014. Real estate investing, cryptocurrency, stocks, private lending, foreign residency, tax saving strategies, infinite banking, assets protection, and much more. Now, here is your host, the founder of the Wealth and Freedom Nexus, John Rickgarn.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you're listening to this. This is John Rickgarn, your host, as always, of the Wealth and Freedom Nexus podcast. And today we have the most famous and most important guest, I might add, thus far in the Nexus podcast, Spike Cohen, a business owner, activist, media figure, and the 2020 vice presidential candidate of the Libertarian Party. Now, if you're like me, you're tired probably of excess regulation, excessive taxes, blatant disregard to privacy that we have seen over the last 20 years, the Patriot Act, the Dodd-Frank Act, FATCA, global minimum tax rate, freezing of bank accounts and assets with no due process. I could go on and on. And here at the Wealth and Freedom Nexus, we are for both of those, building wealth and having freedom. And I don't think any other party in America here represents freedom better than the Libertarian Party. With that, Spike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, John. I'm happy to talk with you.
Appreciate it. So now maybe for my listeners, maybe aren't familiar with you, and maybe this is even the first time they've heard about the Libertarian Party. Could you give us a brief background on yourself, and then maybe take us back to when you first heard about the party and got interested and involved with it?
Sure, absolutely. So my background is actually in the business world, more so than the political world. I actually only got involved in politics about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And, which is why most people never heard of me until 3 years ago. I started a web design company in my teens, just before my 17th birthday. And I also was involved over the years with many startups that were most of which were pretty successful. And I was able to reach a point where in my early mid 30s, beginning of 2017, I was able to retire from that. And that was a longer version of the story. Would be needed to explain all of that. But long story short, I was diagnosed with MS and realized that I really wanted to focus my life on fulfillment over income. And I had reached a point where I could do that. And so that got me into activism, liberty activism, and eventually to the Libertarian Party. And that's where I am now. A little bit of a background on the Libertarian Party. The long story short is that the Libertarian Party was started originally as a protest against Richard Nixon, who was president, taking us off of the gold standard. It was originally not intended to be an actual political party per se. It was really just an act of protest. They would run candidates for president that would get hundreds or even thousands of votes. But the intention wasn't actually to be a party per se, at least not initially. And what has happened over time is we have grown to the point where not only are we a full-fledged political party, decidedly the third largest political party in the country, hundreds of elected officials across the country and more growing in every election cycle. But we are now, I believe, poised to begin taking that next step from getting just local candidates elected to getting statewide candidates elected, and eventually to getting federal candidates elected and accomplishing our goals, which we can talk more about. But that's sort of the long and short of me and of the LP.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I appreciate the intro. And yeah, I don't know, it seems like every national presidential election, I keep asking myself, 300 plus million people in America, and we've narrowed it down to these two. And I think there's numerous people on both sides of the political aisle that would probably
the best of the best have come together, and finally we've distilled it down to two people who have
the bottom of the barrel and then the floor.
No idea what they're talking about. Yes,
exactly.
Absolutely.
So now maybe Spike, we can kind of dive into this maybe a little bit more. I actually went to school, my bachelor's in political science, and I grew up per se, interesting lifestyle. My birth parents were more Republican. My adopted family was Democrat. And so I kind of got to see both sides of various issues, not so much like, oh, those Democrats are horrible, those Republicans are horrible, back and forth. Right. But just, over the last couple of years, we've seen everything from, potential wealth taxes, windfall taxes, excess profit. I don't know what the determining point of that is for taxes, universal basic income, and then probably my favorite by good old Janet Yellen and Joe Biden of, hey, let's have this proposal of monitor, track, and report every single transaction of every single American, of every single bank account of $600 or more. And thankfully, at the time of this recording, that is still just an idea. It hasn't been passed, and I hope it never is. Yes. But if, many of my listeners are like me or, friends, family, maybe they're just kind of the point of just tired of all this regulation, bureaucracy, red tape, etc. How do you see the Libertarian Party fitting in, and how could they, they being the party in general, helping the average American?
Well, the short answer is we want to dismantle everything you just described.
All right. Okay.
So right. We can end the show, right? Like we've figured it out right off the bat. No, so I'd like to, in order to answer this and really kind of provide a underpinning and a foundation behind why we believe what we believe, I want to kind of give sort of a nutshell idea for those who don't really know about libertarianism and the Libertarian Party and what we believe. The 5-second, I guess, elevator speech is that libertarians believe that you should be able to live your life and make determinations for yourself because you can live your life better than anyone else can than you. That's the 5-second version. The slightly longer elevator pitch version where you have multiple floors to go over, maybe a 20-second version, is that libertarians believe that you have autonomy over yourself. For lack of a better word, you own yourself. You have the right to your speech. You have the right to your thoughts, your actions, your labor, and therefore the product of your labor, which is your property, and that is something that belongs inherently to you, that you should be able to make decisions as to what you do with the property and your body and autonomy that you own yourself, and that no one should be imposing that on you. That's the 20-second version. The even longer version, the starting at the top of a tall building and going down to the bottom elevator pitch. These are all elevator pitches just for multiple size buildings.
Just bigger elevators.
Are that the problem with the system that we have right now is that it is based on the idea that a relative handful of individuals and then a slightly larger handful of bureaucrats under them should be deciding how you live your life, that's the best way to organize a society, is this sort of centrally planned top-down society. Well, even if you didn't have centuries of history, up and including to what we're experiencing now, to completely dispel that notion, intuitively it doesn't make sense, right? So if I were able to just rob you and everyone that's listening to this as I see fit, then I'd have no reason to provide you with value. I don't have to show you that the money you're giving me is being used well, because really all I have to show you is that if you don't give me the money, your life's going to be tougher than if you do give me the money, right? Because I'm using force. Also, if I was just put myself in a situation where I were making decisions for all of you and there was little to nothing you could do about it, I have no reason to make good decisions. They don't personally affect me. I can ignore my own rules for you and just do whatever I want, demonstrating that I don't think my way is the right way, or that the way that I impose on you is the right way.
Rules for thee, but not for me.
Yeah, exactly. Rules for thee and not for me. And that boils down to that, is that I now, in this situation, am able to just tell you how to live your life. And it doesn't matter if it's a good idea or not. Again, all I have to prove to you is that it would be better for your well-being if you do what I say than if you don't. Not because it's a good idea, but because I'm going to put the screws to you and make it hurt. That kind of arrangement is an act of aggression against you, your autonomy, against your body, against your labor and the product of your labor, right? Your property. It's not only wrong morally for the same reason that we tell children don't hurt people, don't take from people, don't take their stuff. But it just doesn't intuitively make sense. It doesn't work. And that's literally what our system is built upon. And that's what the Libertarian Party seeks to dismantle. You have been robbed of your property. You've been robbed of your money. But more importantly, you've been robbed of your freedom and your autonomy and your power. And we want to take all of that back from that small handful of people who have way too much power and put it back in your hands where it always belonged. So apply to what you just asked about. So, for example, all these different ideas about taxes and just basically all these different ways to skim from the product of your labor, we've seen what they do with it. They enrich themselves and the cronies who put them in office. And then they leverage your anger, they leverage your suffering, they leverage your resentment over that and say, well, the real problem is the rich. Yeah. Not the rich that put us in office, the rich. And so we got a great, thankfully, the foxes in this hen house have figured out a great plan for you hens. We're going to take even more. And that's what these plans are. All of these things are. You didn't even mention the unrealized gains tax.
Oh, yeah.
And again, for those who are watching this show, I'm sure you already know, unrealized gains means, oh, my money or my investments or my property went up in value, but I haven't sold it.
Yeah.
The government's idea is, no, there's a problem here. You didn't sell it and give us part of it. So now you have to either sell it or just pull money out of your hat and give that to us. All of these are the ideas of thieves and murderers who are enriching themselves at your expense. The Libertarian Party would get rid of all of that.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, I don't know. I just turned 39. I've been watching politics, having some interest in it since the early 90s with the Clinton administration. It just seems like year after year, regardless of what administration is. Yeah, yes. I mean, there's always this, if they just pay their fair share, we just have more money, utopia will transcend upon us. And it's like for every dollar a politician gets, they find a way to spend $3, and it just keeps perpetuating. And at the time of this recording, I think Joe Biden just proposed a fiscally responsible $5.8 trillion budget with only a $1.15 trillion deficit. And I think that's just probably the biggest oxymoron out there, but I don't know.
And what I love is they say, well, that's down from some of the $2 trillion deficits that we've had. Forget the fact that that's a projected deficit that will inevitably be higher than that. But these are the games they play with us, right? When an entity, government or anyone else, has the power or the presumed authority or the ability to take from you as they see fit, to print out money that they force you to use, and to run up debts in your name, don't be surprised if they use that to enrich themselves and whoever it was that's responsible for putting them in office, which is not you, the voter. It's the cronies and the lobbyists and the people that are putting massive amounts of money into these campaign slush funds. And the progressives get it right that the problem is money in politics. The problem is they're looking at it from the demand side instead of the supply side. They're focusing on the fact that there's all this demand for all this money and that people are going in and giving money to politicians. They're giving pennies to politicians in exchange for $100 bills back that you have to pay for. What they're not realizing is that the problem is that government has set itself up to hand off all of this money. I mean, think about it. If I'm running for an office, let's say I'm running for president, that's a $400,000 salary.
Yep.
If I'm getting hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to fund my campaign for that office, which has a $400,000 salary, clearly I'm not going to pay them back myself, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to be paying them from you. That's the problem, which is why we not only need to end taxation, and we can talk about alternatives to taxation. We not only need to end the ability of politicians to run up endless debts, but we also need to end the Federal Reserve. They should not control money. Government should not be deciding what money is or what it's worth. That's what's gotten us in an even bigger mess than the taxes.
This week's podcast is brought to you by Focus Wealth Group. Do you know you need to get life insurance, but don't know where to start or how much to get? Have you heard of infinite banking, but not sure how it works? Reach out to Barry Brooksby and his team. Barry is not only a mentor, but a friend who has helped me for the past 6 years in my pursuit of cash flow and financial independence. Their mission is simple. They teach people how to make money and hold on to more money. Learn more and set up your free initial consultation at focuswealthgroup.com. Yeah. Well, and even just the whole Federal Reserve, I mean, people think it's, oh, that's a branch of the government. It's like, no, that's actually a cartel of private bankers, which kind of sets it apart from the, take your pick, the Bank of Japan, the, Eurobank and et cetera, where that is more government per se versus here we're going to have a cartel of private bankers that decide what monetary and fiscal policy we're going to have as a nation. So
yes, but with a key difference there, because if it were truly private banks and a free market deciding it, it would be way better. We have private, meaning government. It's the word. It's actually fascism. So it is private to the extent that it isn't officially a part of government. Yeah. But the government appoints who's in charge of it. Mm-hmm. The government puts tremendous pressure on them to decide what the actual borrowing rates are and everything like that, and how much is being printed out. The government basically forces them to pull out, or not forces, but strongly encourages them to print out enough money, new money, to lend to the government that we have to pay off. And in exchange, they get to do whatever they want with the rest of the money. Yeah. And there's no auditing of them. Mm-hmm. We don't know how much money's been printed out. We don't know what they've spent it on. We have no way of knowing that. So what it is, it's basically a game of Monopoly where, let's say we have 5 players playing Monopoly and 4 of the players are playing by the rules. The 5th player, every time it's their turn, they get to go to the bank and say, give me 1 million, billion, trillion Monopoly notes and stick them all with the bill for it. What happens? Not only are you stuck with the debt for all the million billions I get, not only do I get to run roughshod over owning the entire board, but the price of everything goes up because, you guys have $500-600 to work with. I have whatever I want to work with. I don't care what the price is. That's part of what causes inflation, right? Mm-hmm. And so these are the problems with the Federal Reserve and the entire system we have. It's a system, it's a confiscatory system. It's a system of theft by theft and for the explicit purpose of theft. And you're the one getting stuck with a bill for it. Exactly. Yeah. And I always kind of chuckle whenever I hear, if a Dave Ramsey follower or someone that says, oh, I live debt free, I have no debt. And I just kind of chuckle like, you must not use the US dollar. And I just get this deer in the headlights look. I'm like, well, if you actually have a physical, everything's going digital now, but if you have a physical dollar, pull it out. It says Federal Reserve note. Note's short for promissory note. And that's in a nutshell of how our system is built now. No, our system is built on debt and inflation. And the thing is, the debt is, people get caught up in the taxes because that's the most acute thing. Give us your money or you're going to get in trouble. That's a problem, obviously. And then maybe the next group of people will go, no, the real problem is the debt. And they're right. That's also a problem. Mm-hmm. It's future taxes that are going to be even higher to pay off the interest and the debt on all this debt that's being run up in your name. But the real problem, which you're feeling right now and don't even realize, I shouldn't say you aren't, but most people don't realize what it's being caused by. Mm-hmm. If I can just print out as many notes as I want, okay, if we're all being forced through the taxation system and through the regulation system to use Federal Reserve notes for the vast majority of our monetary transactions, which means we're all using this common currency. Mm-hmm. If this one entity has the ability to just print out as many of those notes as they want, without also increasing the number of goods and services along with it, that means we have roughly the same number of goods and services and this much more money, which means this much more money is chasing the same number of goods and services. Inevitably, the number of those goods and the price of those goods and services is going to go up because there's more money to throw at it. And the value of that money is being diminished as a result of that. Okay. Now, the cost of living generally, for the most part, goes up fairly evenly for everyone. You're rich, you're poor, it doesn't matter. The cost of an apple is still the cost of an apple. The cost of a car is still the cost of a car. So your overall cost of living is going up. The closer you are in proximity to getting that money, that new money, the less that affects you. The wealthier you are, the less that affects you. Typically, the wealthier you are, the closer you are in proximity to getting that new money. So this is a system that ensures a continued stratification between those who have the least and those who have the most. And that's why we see this constant transfer of wealth from the least to the most. And the people who have the most immediate concern for that, which typically are progressives, have been told that the answer to that, the solution to that, is to completely double and triple and quadruple down on that system of confiscation that is causing that to happen. Things like UBI, things like the welfare state, which is an act of confiscation for the very people that have the most money. If Amazon and Walmart and the heads of government and all the wealthiest, most powerful people in this country and planet are telling you that this is the way to fix the problem, it's likely that it's not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no question. So now, Spike, we've obviously touched base on a number of topics, and I think generally speaking, and I know there's numerous surveys and polls out there that are disgusted with Republicans versus Democrats and the political system, the system we have, et cetera. And you've already touched base on what a lot of the values the Libertarian Party stands for. Why do you think it, though, is this kind of quandary? Like, here's a party that many Americans, I think, could identify with or value, but doesn't have, as much of a, tailwind or as big of a presence. I mean, there's obviously I know many people are familiar with Ron Paul, Glenn Jacobs, known as Kane in the old WWE wrestling, is now a mayor of Knox County and very heavy in the libertarian space. But just generally speaking, why do you think the party hasn't gotten a larger foothold in politics nationwide?
Because the majority of people haven't heard of us. Okay. And the vast majority of people who have heard of us think we can't win and it's a waste of a vote to vote for us. That's really what it comes down to. Now, I mean, we can look at polling, high 60s, high 70s, vast majority of the American public are sick of voting Republican, Democrat. They want a viable third party. Key word there, viable. Most people are not early adopters. Most people, before they're going to vote for something, they need to know that there's at least a chance that we're going to win. Now, there's the conundrum. We can't win unless we get enough votes to win.
Yeah.
We can't get enough votes to win if there aren't people that think that we can win, which is why we as libertarians in the past have often gotten really frustrated when we're talking to people and they go, you can't win, so I'm not going to vote for you. And we're like, we'd win if you voted for us. But the thing is, they're right. And here's why. They're making it come true. We can't win because they're not voting for us because they think we can't win. And that's why I have been focusing more and more, or less and less, on the way we've been trying to do it, which is telling them about, the problems we have with ballot access, which is basically reinforcing their belief that we can't win. And then being angry when they say, well, I still think you can't win. You son of a bitch. Well, we just told them we can't. Less and less on that, less and less on talking about how the system is victimizing us, and more on addressing actual concerns that people have. So I'm launching a group called You Are the Power. By the time you're releasing this, it may already be launched. That's how soon it's happening. And what You Are the Power is, it's an earlier buy-in for people who aren't ready to take the leap from saying, I agree with libertarians a lot, and I'm sick of Republicans and Democrats. I don't want nothing to do with them. Take the leap from that to saying, I want to vote for your third party that has very little likelihood of winning outside of local elections, and, join your party and donate to it and vote for candidates for president, vice president, and Congress and everything else because I believe in this. That is we are asking for a significant jump and a significant buy-in that, frankly, the vast majority of voters have been demonstrating for 50 years now that they're simply not willing to make. What You Are the Power does is it bridges that gap. So when someone comes to me and says, or when I go to someone and they tell me, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think I agree with everything you're saying, but I'm not voting libertarian. I think it's a waste of time. I think you're going to lose. I don't want my vote to go to not go to the lesser evil and all that good cop, bad cop routine. Whatever their reason is, instead of me arguing with them about why they should vote libertarian, which anyone in a sales and marketing background knows you don't argue with the customer and tell them why they're wrong. Instead, you pivot them to a better product that actually meets what they're telling you they need. They're telling us they want something else. So my answer is, okay, well, hey, by the way, we're working on this thing where, we're working against a tax increase in your area, or we're working for criminal justice reform in your area, working on a specific issue, single issue in their location, in their local area, their city, their county, their state, whatever. And here's what you can do to help us. We'd love for you to join us. I don't care your party affiliation. I don't care if you've completely bought into our ideas. If you agree with us on this in your area, then we'd like to work with you on it. Here's what we're doing. Here's how you can help. So You Are the Power is single issue, localized activism. And we are activating libertarian influencers and activists and elected officials and candidates, as well as people outside the Libertarian Party, to be a part of a movement that is going to be outside of, adjacent to, and running in parallel with the goals of the Libertarian Party, but decidedly outside of it. So gotcha. We're not going to make it to the White House. And I know what you wanted to ask me about hypothetically what can happen, and we can talk about that.
Sure.
But we're not going to make it to the White House. And for that matter, we're not going to make it to Congress. And for that matter, we're not going to make it to the governor's mansion of whatever state you live in. And we're likely to not really get too many spots in even the state legislature until we have demonstrated to people, A, what our ideas look like in their backyard, and B, that we have the wherewithal to actually be able to move up to that. Mm-hmm. That's what You Are the Power does.
Okay. And it's interesting you mentioned the governor's mansion being here in Minnesota. And granted, this is about 24 years ago, give or take. And it wasn't a libertarian, but
Jesse Ventura.
Jesse the Body Ventura beat out very popular Republican and Democratic candidates. And he said the best, we shocked the world. And I think it did set, repercussions throughout. It's like, there's no way this bald-headed ex-wrestler's ever going to get to the governor's mansion. And there he did. And, I'm not here to defend or say, yep, he was great, yep, he was bad or anything, but just the fact.
But he got elected.
Yeah, he got elected. It's like, that's proof right there. A viable third party, like you said, can get elected. And
absolutely,
without going down that self-prophecy of, well, I don't think they're viable and it's just a wasted vote, so there I won't do it, even though I want him to get elected. It's like, you're just setting yourself up for failure. But we see it in Minnesota. I think we can see it again. I really do.
Oh, we absolutely can. I want to make something clear. It is not impossible for that to happen. And Jesse Ventura is proof of it. But let's look at what had to happen in order for that to happen. Jesse Ventura was the most well-known and one of the most popular people in Minnesota.
Yep.
Okay. He was running at a time when there was an incumbent governor and a former governor that were running as the Republican and Democrat candidates who were wildly unpopular and were not good at presenting their ideas. Jesse Ventura is not only, people look at him and they're always a lunkhead, and he's a trained actor. Okay. And he knows how to work an audience. He knows how to work a crowd. He knows how to utilize and manipulate people's I shouldn't say manipulate, but use people's emotions. He knows how to, to get an emotional response. He knows how to demonstrate a connection with people, good and bad. He was a bad guy for most of his career, but he was able to do that. And he also had money. So he was able to fund the campaign. So it is certainly possible for that to happen. Although there have been some ballot access restrictions in most states that have happened since then that would make that a lot harder, in the same way that they put a lot of restrictions after Ross Perot to make sure that never happened again. But generally speaking, if we want Libertarian Party or a third party in general, if we want them winning to become a matter of course, not just this lightning could strike thing, but this actual thing that happens because we have been able to successfully win a cultural argument and change the culture, because that's another big part of it. Jesse Ventura got into office. He wasn't able to do a lot of what he wanted to do, because the gap between what he wanted to do and what voters were comfortable with once they actually elected him was quite wide, because there wasn't a corresponding cultural change. They voted for the man, not necessarily the policies, or at least not all of the policies, and so little got done. I don't just want to get libertarians elected to office. I want libertarianism as policy to change so that people are set free. And it's the work that we're going to do, not just to demonstrate viability of our ideas and of our movement, but in doing so to bring people into the movement and the greater culture. I want the socialists and progressives did this. It doesn't matter whether a Republican or a Democrat gets elected. We get more government, we get more rules, we get more laws, we get more protection, we get more debt, we get more wars, we get more people in cages, and all of that. We want to change that culture to where people want less of that, and recognize that in order to get less of that, the best way for that to happen is for them and others to have more control and autonomy and power and their money over their own lives. And that's what we're working on with the Libertarian Party, with You Are the Power, and with the greater libertarian movement.
Okay, that was good. Yeah, and obviously with Jesse, I mean, he even mentioned numerous times he kind of had the three-headed monster, as he called it, where he was working as the Reform Party governor. and the legislature was Democratic and House was Republican, or maybe I got those two.
Yep.
But like, having a split government is bad enough, but when you got three parties involved, nothing gets done, so to speak.
Exactly.
So, but now, let's just go down the rabbit hole, and maybe, we talk about like, big names, and let's just say, go for the impossible. And, I don't know, let's just say, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson decides to be the 2024 Libertarian presidential candidate, and with his name recognition against, I don't know, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, I don't know, whoever's in there. And lo and behold, Libertarian is in the White House. Let's just go down that rabbit hole. And there are more elections. Republicans are kicked out, Democrats are kicked out. What do you foresee, like, maybe I'll just even preface it as when that happens, not so much an if, but when that eventually happens. What do you think as Americans we'd see going forward versus what we've seen in the last 20 years?
Well, the short answer is you would see an undoing of what we've been seeing over the last several decades, and an undoing of the harm that it has caused, and an increase in all the things that we want as a result. Now, here's what that looks like in more detail. So in your hypothetical where, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson or some hyper libertarian celebrity as well is able to not just get him or herself elected to the White House, but cause a sweep of gold across the nation, and we now have libertarian majorities across the country. What that would initially look like at the federal level especially is an undoing of the bad executive orders, the bad regulations, the bad executive policy, like, for example, the constant use of the authorization of use of military force from 2001 to continue bombing countries around the world.
Plus the war on terror.
the war on terror and all of that. At a legislative level, it would be the undoing of bad laws and bad policy from there. But the actual, like, what the goals would be are shifting government from a system of taxation and debt and control of currency to one of voluntary funding. Ideas like voluntary transfer fees, which would work as sort of like a warranty on the product that you're buying or selling, that there would be a certain percent, say 5%, 10%, whatever the market would be willing to pay, where if you pay that, you would be protected if anything happened on that. You could sue people, you could use the system and whatever. But if you don't, you just can't use those things if something goes wrong with that transaction, but you don't have to pay it. That creates a little bit of feedback that if that fee, whatever that percentage is too high, people just won't pay it. So that forces government to live within its means the same way the rest of us have to. If we're not providing as much value as what we're costing, we have to change something, provide more value or cost less, right? So that would be one thing in terms of the fiscal policy, which would, of course, mean a much smaller and more streamlined government, a government whose only function is to protect lives, rights, and property. Okay. Not trying to tell you how you should live your life, not trying to protect you by making everything worse, not trying to, save you or make you more healthy or more prosperous by creating or worsening crises, which is really what they do. Not driving up the price of everything by subsidizing it, not regulating everything and making it cost more and be less available, just protecting lives, rights, and property. And that's it. So it would be a much smaller, more streamlined, more responsive government that people actually wanted. And as a result of that, as we know, more market economics, less control over your life, more of your money in your pocket, more flexibility and ability for you to make decisions, less likelihood of you ending up in a cage for something that shouldn't even be a crime in the first place. All of these things would lead to happier, safer, freer, more prosperous and better educated and everything else communities, and we would live better lives as a result.
Wow. Yeah, I think pretty much at least everyone I know in my circle would definitely be on board with that. There's obviously the outliers that want more government, or on the other side want just pure anarchy, no government whatsoever. Like you said, just protecting property, lives, and rights. It's like, well, I think we need limited government is maybe the best phrase to use there, but not what we have currently overarching in the United States.
Absolutely. And I want to make something clear. I want to clarify. The Libertarian Party is a sort of an alliance between various stripes of libertarians. We all believe that all acts of of coercion or force against others is inherently an act of aggression and is wrong. Now, there are minarchists, which are believers in a very small, limited government, that recognize that there needs to be, or believe that there needs to be, a limited amount of coercion being done by a governing entity that presumes a monopoly of force in order to protect everyone else's rights. I'm actually an anarcho-capitalist. I'm a believer that the best form of governance is one that is totally voluntary, that people can opt in and opt out of, and is not a monopoly of presumed authority, but rather one that comes out of the voluntary and market-based needs of the people, and which can therefore shift and change as needed. Now, with that said, I am more than happy with we are completely away from either one of those things.
Sure.
Both what minarchists want and what anarchists want is right now very much in the same direction and very much far down the road. I would be happy for us to get to the limited, small, market-oriented and responsive government that we all would be okay with at the very least. And then from there, figure out, do we want to keep going and have just a completely market-based society with no coercive, monopolistic entity in charge? Or is this necessary, or do we want it, or does this area want it and this one doesn't? I'm fine with figuring that out. But I think right now we need to be focusing on our main focus needs to be on people just recognizing inherently, again, making a cultural change of people realizing that the problems we're facing aren't because we haven't given the right power or enough power to the right people. It's just the opposite. It's that entire system is doomed to fail to serve us, and it exists and it succeeds only in enriching the people who control it and the people that put them there. And that we need to undo that. And then we'll figure out where we are when we get there.
Sure. No, yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, like you said, with the cronies, and I always kind of laugh at the whole finger pointing, and we want to go after this rich person, but not this rich person.
But yes.
We're against Jeff Bezos, but George Soros, Michael Bloomberg, he's fine. Yep. And split all these hairs. It's like, let's just call it spade a spade.
Yep. And vice versa. Then there are people who are fine with the Jeff Bezos, but not with the George Soros.
Oh, exactly.
Even though they're literally doing the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also a side note there, that is a study in the corrupting influence of the system. Jeff Bezos started his company out of like this little tiny office that's roughly the same size as my little podcasting corner I have in this room right now. Okay. And it was this disruptive idea that was, going to completely change how things were. And it happened. Right. Yeah. Like it even had a false start in the 90s and then it ended up happening. Right. This is a guy who has stuck with it. And now look at everything he's doing. Now he's working on space travel and all this stuff. But somewhere along the line, in fact, it shouldn't be somewhere, as he continued moving up the line, becoming more wealthy, closer to the proximity of those who have that centralized power. Now, all of a sudden, he's getting $10 billion no bid contracts from the Department of Defense. And he's getting, paid for a contract that someone else won as like a secondary. And then he's using that money to buy a media ad, to buy MGM, and to have even more control of entertainment. So it's someone that it started as, I'm going to find a great way for people to sell stuff. And now it's like, I'm going to control everything. But this is what happens to any person. I don't think there's anything inherently bad or good about Jeff Bezos. I think he's a human being who has some incredible foresight and a nature to stick to things. He has that all the X factors that make it possible to be an incredible entrepreneur. And when you rise to a certain level, you get close to that power. And as a human being, you get corrupted by it. The problem is not people. The problem is the system. It is a system that inherently encourages corruption. It inherently encourages bad decisions because no one's accountable for them. It inherently encourages overspending, debt, theft, not just fiscal irresponsibility, but fiscal malevolence because of the nature of the system. It is too much power in the hands of too few people who have no feedback mechanism to know if they're doing the right thing or not. That's the problem with government.
Yep. And I think, it's not so much changing the pieces on a chessboard. It's about getting rid of the chessboard entirely and starting with an entire new system.
It's about no longer playing that game. Yes, exactly.
All right. So as we wind up here, Spike, and again, I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to talk to my listeners about the Libertarian Party. Obviously, I look at it as the true party of freedom for ones wanting to, grow their lives and live their lives the way they want. If someone was interested in learning more, maybe about you, the You Are the Power campaign, etc., what's the best way to reach out to you?
So if you want to find out more about You Are the Power, you want to find out more about me, you want to follow what I'm doing, I have some fantastic news for you. All of those things can happen at spikecohen.com. Gotcha. If you go to spikecohen.com, we will possibly, again, by the time this is launched, the website might be up, depending on how many days before you release this. But for now, if you go to spikecohen.com, and there's a form there that you can fill out to be among the first to find out when we do our launch. And then when we will launch, it will be You Are the Power. But also on spikecohen.com, you can follow my upcoming events that I'm going to be at. It has all the links to all my social media. I'm very active on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Instagram. I'm on TikTok for the kids. But again, all of that is available on spikecohen.com. I also do podcasting on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at muddiedwatersmedia.com. And that's also available on all social media platforms and all podcasting platforms as well.
All right. Sounds good. I'll make sure I get all those on the show notes. And yeah, depending on the time this goes to publication or whenever someone's listening to this feature, hopefully that You Are the Power is up and ready and going full blast.
If it is, the link will be right there on spikecohen.com. So either way, it'll be there. You'll be able to find it.
Sounds good. Well, I appreciate again your time, Spike, for coming on and telling my listeners about the Libertarian Party.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me on.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to share, rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. For more updates, check out www.wealthandfreedomnexus.com. Remember, nothing on this show should be considered tax, legal, investment, or professional advice. This show is produced solely for educational and informational purposes. Please consult an appropriate and licensed tax, legal, real estate, or business professional for specific advice for your situation. For distribution or publication rights or media interviews, please contact the host.